Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a topic that, on the surface, might seem light, maybe even trivial, but I promise you it's profoundly revealing. It tells us so much about who we are, where we've been, and, where we're going. We're talking about the incredible, often perplexing, always fascinating world of comedy and entertainment. So the big question, is it overrated or underrated? What truly makes us laugh? And what does that laughter tell us about ourselves? Okay, let's unpack this.
That's exactly right. And this isn't just about analyzing jokes or critiquing the latest movie. What we're really doing in this deep dive is, examining human nature. We're peeling back the layers of societal norms and maybe even understanding the very fabric of civilization itself. I mean, think about it. Understanding what we laugh at helps us understand who we are, collectively and individually. It's like a mirror reflecting our shared anxieties, our joys. It's a pressure valve for societal tensions, and often, actually, a surprisingly potent weapon.
Yeah, definitely. And our mission today, for you listening, is to cut through all the noise. We've gathered a stack of diverse sources, articles, research, historical accounts, even some philosophical takes. And we're here to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights for you. We want to reveal some surprising facts, connect dots you might not have seen before, and basically help you quickly become well-informed about why we laugh, how comedy's evolved, and what it truly means for us today. So get ready for some serious aha moments, but hopefully without feeling overwhelmed by information overload. We're here to make sense of the world, maybe one laugh at a time. Okay, so let's kick this off with a journey back, way back, all the way to the beginnings. Where did laughter, performance, entertainment, where did it first emerge? Because I think it's easy to assume comedy is this modern thing, right? Like stand-up specials, viral videos. But the truth is, it has these incredibly deep, ancient roots. They stretch back much further than you might think.
Oh, absolutely. If we travel way, way back, we're talking roughly 2400 BCE, back to the cradle of civilization, ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia. Our sources show that the earliest forms of musical and comedic performances were often deeply intertwined with religious rituals. They weren't simply for amusement. They were significant parts of communal, even sacred practices. You can almost picture these temple ceremonies where musical performances might include lighthearted, maybe even satirical elements. So it suggests that from its very start, entertainment served this kind of multifaceted purpose. It was bridging the gap between the divine and the everyday, making abstract concepts more human, more relatable. It wasn't just entertainment for entertainment's sake. It was embedded in the social and spiritual fabric.
That's really fascinating. So it wasn't just a casual joke here and there. It suggests entertainment, and comedy maybe specifically, had a function beyond just distraction, like almost a teaching role or a unifying one. What does that tell us about the early function of performance when it's part of something as serious as a religious ceremony? Was it to lighten the mood, make the gods seem more approachable, or something else?
Well, it definitely points to a role in communal engagement, maybe a way to make complex or really solemn rituals more accessible, more memorable perhaps, or even to provide a moment of collective a catharsis for everyone there. Imagine a priest maybe using a lighthearted, almost comedic take on a deity's myth during a festival to get the crowd involved, or a musician weaving humor into a sacred song. It could have been a way to sort of demystify the divine or to articulate common human failings in a context where everyone could recognize themselves, fostering a shared experience. It really indicates that from the very beginning, entertainment was doing multiple things at once, bridging that gap between the sacred and the everyday.
Right. So from those ritualistic roots, we then see this huge leap in Greece. Specifically, 5th century BCE Athens. This is where comedy really starts to get formalized, right? In Athenian theater. You think of playwrights like Aristophanes. And he wasn't just telling jokes, he was actively satirizing politics, war, the society around him. So it shifted from being this sort of embedded ritual thing to a distinct art form with a clear critical function.
Oh, it was a monumental shift. It truly shaped Western comedic traditions. The formalization of comedy in Greek theater, especially during the Dionysian festivals, elevated it. It became a recognized art form, capable of really profound social commentary. Aristophanes particularly was delivering what we might call, the early hot takes. His plays, like Lysistrata, the one where women go on a sex strike to end war, hilarious but pointed. Or The Clouds, which satirized famous philosophers like Socrates. These didn't just entertain, they served as potent social critique within this growing democracy. It was a very public space for challenging authority and questioning norms, all wrapped up in clever wit and biting satire, often naming and shaming public figures directly.
Wow. So if Aristophanes were around today, he'd be all over Twitter, or maybe have a Netflix special calling out politicians. It makes you wonder if that function of comedy challenging the powerful is just inherent, something that carries through time, whatever the medium.
It's a really compelling argument for that timeless capacity of humor to be a critical lens. However, the Roman era, which runs from about the 1st century BCE to the 5th century CE, saw a very different path. While the Greeks valued that intellectual, satirical comedy, the Romans shifted towards something much bawdier, more physical, more grand. We're talking slapstick. Comedic skits often performed between gladiator fights, even staged mock executions as part of these huge spectacles in the Colosseum. Entertainment became mass spectacle, often without much intellectual nuance, designed for raw impact.
Whoa, that's a really stark contrast from intellectual satire to, well, public blood sport with jokes in between. Why that huge move towards the physical and frankly often violent stuff? What does that tell us about what Roman society actually demanded from its entertainment?
Well, it reveals a pretty profound shift in cultural values and priorities. Roman society was vast, incredibly diverse, heavily stratified. It included loads of conquered peoples. The entertainment they preferred reflected this desire for grand, visceral public displays that could appeal to a huge range of social classes, from the elites down to the plebes, often all at the same time. It was partly about controlling and pacifying the masses, offering immediate gratification and a shared, albeit often brutal, experience that could cut across language or cultural barriers. The nuance of Greek intellectual comedy probably would have been lost on or just not wanted by a population that increasingly sought these large-scale sensory overloads. This emphasis on broad physical humor and, often brutal public displays served a different social function, unified through shared spectacle, not shared intellectual critique. Kind of chilling when you think about how modern media can sometimes prioritize spectacle over substance today, right? Yeah,
that is a bit unsettling. And then, moving into the Middle Ages, a time we often think of as pretty rigid, maybe somber. But even then, laughter found a way, didn't it? Through traveling minstrels, jesters, they're using humor to poke fun at royalty, often risking their actual lives to do it. Sounds like entertainment then was almost a form of, underground resistance, a brave act of social commentary.
It absolutely was. In a time with such strict social hierarchy and really severe punishments for dissent, the jester held this unique and frankly precarious position. They were often the only ones who could speak truth to power without, immediate execution. They managed to say what others couldn't by cloaking their observations in wit, in absurdity, clever wordplay. It was a really delicate dance, a fine line between a witty observation and outright treason. A jester might make a quip about a king's ridiculous spending, something no courtier would dare say, but present it in such a way, maybe mimicking the king's walk or exaggerating his demands, that it came off as humor, not insult. This subversive power of humor, even back then, was undeniable. It acted as a pressure release, both for the common folk and probably for the court itself.
That's incredible. It really shows humor's power as that pressure release valve, allowing critiques that would otherwise be totally impossible. Okay, fast forward to the early modern era, roughly the 1600s to 1800s, we see comedy expanding into new forms. Shakespeare's comedies are blending sophisticated wit with social commentary, deep character studies, but then you also get the popularization of mass entertainment through things like vaudeville and circuses.
Yeah, this period marks a really crucial expansion and diversification of comedic forms. Shakespeare's comedies, like A Midsummer Night's Dream with its playful look at love and illusion, or Twelfth Night's clever gender bending, they showcased how sophisticated wit could reflect and influence the era. They offered complex characters, intricate plots, but still delivered laugh-out-loud moments and astute social observations. His characters often use wordplay and irony to subtly critique societal norms, and then simultaneously the rise of vaudeville in the late 19th century and the huge popularity of circuses began to standardize and commercialize mass appeal entertainment. These were structured shows designed for broad audiences, featuring everything from acrobats to singers and, of course, clowns, slapstick routines, comedic sketches. This was really the beginning of entertainment becoming a truly accessible, ticketed thing, moving beyond just elite theaters or local fairs to reach general publics in a more uniform way, especially in rapidly growing cities.
It's like we're watching the very seeds of modern mass media being planted, right? Creating a template for how entertainment could be packaged and consumed. Which brings us smack into the 20th century boom. This is where radio, then film, then TV just exploded entertainment onto the scene, transformed it into a truly global commodity. And with that, the line between comedian, celebrity, social critic, it blurred profoundly. You get figures like Charlie Chaplin, Richard Pryor, George Carlin becoming these cultural giants.
Oh, the impact of mass media here is just impossible to overstate. These technologies let humor reach unprecedented audiences, breaking down geographical social barriers almost instantly. Charlie Chaplin's tramp character, for instance. He used visual comedy to deliver powerful social commentary on poverty, industrialization, human dignity, stuff that resonated globally, across language barriers, reaching millions who'd never seen live comedy. Then later, figures like Richard Pryor and George Carlin really pushed the boundaries on race, politics, language, challenging societal norms directly, often controversially, on TV and stage. They weren't just entertainers, they were cultural lightning rods. They used their huge platforms to force uncomfortable conversations, expose hypocrisies, and really reshape public discourse.
And it leads directly into the 21st century shift, which is happening right now all around us. Social media, meme culture, streaming, they've democratized comedy in ways we never imagined.
Yeah.
Which is great for new voices, right? But it's also made it incredibly algorithmic. Suddenly we're seeing these quick dopamine hits replacing what used to be maybe slower burns. It's transforming how we consume, maybe even how we create humor.
It's a true double-edged sword, this digital revolution, no doubt about it. The accessibility has drastically changed both content creation and consumption. Anyone with a phone can make and share comedic content. That leads to an explosion of diverse voices, a really rapid iteration of comedic styles. However, the implications of algorithms dictating what we find funny based on our past clicks and watches are profound. This algorithmic shift doesn't just change what we laugh at, it subtly rewires how our brains process humor. It could be eroding our patience for complex narratives, conditioning us for constant, brief dopamine hits, like a comedic form of collective ADHD almost. This shift towards immediate brief comedic experiences like how fast memes spread, or a stand-up special dropping globally overnight on Netflix, it prioritizes virality and quick reactions over depth or sustained narrative. And that shapes not just what we consume, but what gets produced in the first place.
And speaking of audience feedback from way back, there's that fascinating historical detail. Our sources remind us that in ancient Greece, if you weren't sunny enough, the audience could actually throw vegetables at you. Or, even worse, stones. Imagine performing knowing a bad set could literally mean getting pelted.
Right. It's such a primal form of audience feedback, isn't it? You could almost ask if that was maybe the first cancel culture, in a very literal, physical sense. It makes you think about the historical parallels and the differences with modern audience reactions. While today's cancellation might involve, social media pylons, reputational damage, maybe financial hits, the core impulse, that immediate, often visceral rejection of content or a performer, has this remarkably long history. It highlights that the relationship between performer and audience has always been dynamic, sometimes brutal, and constantly evolving. The stakes, though, have definitely changed.
Okay, so we've traced the when of comedy and entertainment, how it's evolved over millennia, but now let's dive into the why. What are the fundamental reasons behind laughter? It's not just a physical reaction, is it? It seems deeply rooted in our psychology, how we interact with the world.
You're absolutely right. It's far more complex than just a simple reflex. One of the earliest and still really enduring theories is Freud's relief theory. Now, many people know the basic idea of laughter as a psychic pressure valve. But the deeper insight here is how it lets us engage with and process taboo or repressed emotions in a safe, acceptable way. It's not just releasing general tension, it's specifically about the energy tied to forbidden thoughts or uncomfortable truths.
Ah, okay. So that would explain the appeal of dark humor, wouldn't it? Or jokes about really sensitive, maybe even forbidden subjects. You're dealing with something uncomfortable, maybe even something society says you shouldn't talk about. But the comedic frame lets you release the tension around it. So it's like a cathartic role for comedy,
Right.
dealing with discomfort by kind of externalizing it, defanging it through humor.
Precisely. It allows for a momentary transgression, a little dip into the forbidden, but without real-world consequences. It provides a psychological release and a way to confront uncomfortable realities at a safe distance. Then you have the superiority theory. This one suggests we often laugh because we feel better than someone else. It taps into a pretty primal sense of triumph or validation. Think of roast culture, where comedians just verbally tear each other down for laughs, or, frankly, the entire premise of a lot of reality TV, where we often derive pleasure from the perceived inferiority or awkwardness or mishaps of others.
That's maybe a bit more cynical, but I can definitely see it. It taps into a certain social dynamic, doesn't it? That moment when we feel pleasure from someone else's perceived slip-up. It's the classic slip on a banana peel, right? As long as they're not actually hurt, there's that quick, almost primal burst of amusement at their momentary failure.
Yes, that's a perfect classic example. That momentary fall from grace, observed from a position of safety. And that brings us to a more contemporary and I think more nuanced theory that kind of bridges these ideas, the benign violation theory. This was proposed by psychologists Peter McGraw and Caleb Warren back in 2010. The core idea is that humor arises when something is simultaneously wrong yet safe.
Okay, wrong yet safe. What's fascinating here is how it explains that paradox. So it's about a violation, something that shouldn't happen, maybe it's inappropriate, something that triggers a sense of wrongness. But it happens within a context that signals it's harmless or ultimately inconsequential. Like the dark humor about death in a war zone you mentioned, it helps soldiers cope, it's transgressive, it violates solemnity, but within their specific context, it becomes a coping mechanism, making it psychologically benign or safe.
Exactly. The paradox is the absolute key. How can something be simultaneously transgressive and harmless? In the soldier's example, it's about taking something horrific, unmanageable, reframing it as a violation of normal life, but experiencing it in a benign way through laughter. That makes it psychologically safer to process and discuss. This theory has really wide application in understanding coping mechanisms, especially in stressful or traumatic environments. It lets individuals mentally distance themselves from a threat while still acknowledging its absurdity or horror. It's why gallows humor is so common in high-stakes professions like medicine or emergency services.
Right. Switching gears slightly, let's talk about something incredibly relevant to the digital age: parasocial bonds. Our sources point out that comedy creates this intimacy at a distance. Audiences form these really deep emotional connections with stand-up comics or YouTubers or podcasters, even without any real interaction, feeling like they truly know them.
This is such a powerful and, increasingly common phenomenon. We feel this personal connection to performers we've never met because they often share intimate details, vulnerabilities, or perspectives that resonate deeply with us. Our brains, which are evolutionarily wired for small group interactions, kind of create this illusion of a reciprocal relationship, even when it's totally one way. The vulnerability and perceived authenticity of many comedians, especially online, really taps into this ancient wiring. It makes us invest emotionally in them as if they were part of our inner circle. And this fundamentally alters their influence on our worldview, maybe even our sense of identity. It's that feeling of knowing your favorite YouTuber or comic, feeling like you're part of their world, even though it's just consumption.
And then sociologically, humor has this incredible dual role. It can enforce group norms, right? Act as a kind of social glue that reinforces shared beliefs, subtly reminding everyone what's acceptable behavior. But on the flip side, it also fundamentally challenges power. Especially in authoritarian societies, satire can become one of the last tools left for dissent, a quiet but potent form of rebellion.
This dual role is absolutely critical to understanding humor's societal function. A joke can reinforce existing structures by mocking those who deviate from the norms. That signals what's acceptable within a group, solidifies social boundaries. But conversely, humor can chip away at oppressive structures. When direct protest is suppressed, satire, caricature, a cleverly crafted comedic sketch, it can expose the absurdity, the hypocrisy, the cruelty of power without directly inciting, say, a violent crackdown. It's a way of saying we see you to those in power, even subtly, and building solidarity among the oppressed.
Like, you see those TikTok skits mocking workplace burnout, or the absurdity of hustle culture. They might seem light, just a quick laugh, easily dismissed as trivial. But our sources point out they reflect this growing global disillusionment with that whole idea. It's not just a personal gripe, it's a collective expression of a broader societal feeling.
Yes, and that's precisely the sociological significance. These seemingly light personal jokes about work experiences reflect broader societal sentiments. They're a collective form of emotional release and critique. They let individuals articulate frustrations that might otherwise go unexpressed, and in doing so, they build solidarity among those who feel similarly, reinforcing a shared understanding and maybe a subtle rebellion against an often unseen pressure. It really shows how personal jokes can become these tiny acts of collective defiance, or at least shared acknowledgement of systemic issues.
So, if laughter is this ancient, psychologically potent force, how is it playing out right now in our hyper-connected digital present? We've seen these massive shifts with meme culture and what some are calling microwave comedy, quick hits, right? Are we in a world where, everything is funny now? Or maybe where nothing truly is?
Well, meme culture is a prime example of this duality you're talking about. It thrives on incredible speed and brevity. A single image, a short video, can spread humor globally in minutes, creates instant shared cultural touchstones. And while this rapid spread democratizes humor, makes it super accessible, it also inherently flattens nuance. That's the downside. Memes are built for quick consumption. They distill complex ideas, political statements, philosophical thoughts into these highly compressed, often decontextualized forms. They prioritize immediate impact over intricate meaning.
So what's gained and what's lost there? I mean, you can share a powerful feeling instantly, reach millions, create a sense of shared understanding, which is cool, but are we maybe losing the ability to engage with the complex ideas that might have inspired the meme in the first place as like a comedic shorthand that might eventually just become the whole conversation instead of just a starting point?
Exactly. The depth of, say, political satire or philosophical observation can get reduced to a quick visual gag. And while it spreads fast, it can also lead to a superficial engagement with the underlying issues, or even misinterpretation because context is often stripped away. And then you have what's known as online humor. You know, the absurdist, deeply ironic, or post-ironic content you see on platforms like Adult Swim or certain corners of Twitter. This kind of humor resonates really deeply within specific, often quite insular online communities, but frequently baffles and alienates broader audiences.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. You see a joke, and it only makes sense if you spent like the last 10 years deep in certain internet rabbit holes steeped in very specific references. It feels incredibly insular. Why does it hit so hard with certain groups, and why does it just completely baffle others? Is it like a new form of cultural gatekeeping, where if you don't get it, you're just not part of the club?
It definitely creates an implicit barrier. This humor often requires a shared understanding of this vast accumulated body of internet lore, obscure references, and a specific, often cynical or kind of once-weary worldview. Those who are in the know find connection and validation creates a tight-knit community. While outsiders are left bewildered, feeling excluded, it can certainly feel like a new form of cultural gatekeeping, whether it's intentional or not. It prioritizes a particular kind of digital fluency, an intuitive grasp of how online communities work, their unique cultural codes, their inside jokes.
Then there's the really big one, comedy versus political correctness. Our sources highlight a growing generational divide here. On the one side, you have some maybe older folks crying censorship, arguing for absolute free speech and comedy, while on the other, Gen Z seems to be increasingly prioritizing what they call inclusive humor, humor that aims to punch up, not down.
And this raises a profoundly important question about the different ethical frameworks at play. It's a real clash. Is it primarily about artistic freedom, the right to say anything, or is it more about social responsibility, the impact of words, especially on marginalized groups? Punching up, in comedic terms, means directing humor at those in positions of power, privilege, authority, like politicians, corporations, dominant social groups, rather than punching down at those who are already vulnerable or marginalized specific racial groups, disabled individuals, the poor, etc. So it's a debate about the target of the joke and the potential harm it might cause, not just the subjective intent of the comedian. This clash really highlights fundamental differences in how generations perceive humor's role and its ethical boundaries, and it often leads to these very public disagreements about what's acceptable.
And the power of these streaming platforms, like Netflix, is just undeniable now. Their specials shape global humor trends. They become the default way many people experience stand-up. Our sources point out that comedians might be increasingly tailoring their content to algorithms rather than purely to authenticity or their own artistic vision. That could affect the work itself.
Yeah, this is a significant concern for artistic expression and for the diversity of comedic voices. The commercialization and data-driven nature of modern comedy mean that content can be optimized for viewership metrics. That can lead to creative choices that might appeal to the broadest possible algorithm-identified audience, rather than pushing boundaries or developing truly unique, maybe niche voices. This could potentially lead to more homogenized content, as what works on one platform becomes the blueprint for others. It might inadvertently stifle true artistic risk-taking, the development of more challenging or unconventional comedic forms. Authenticity can get sidelined for algorithmic appeal.
Speaking of authentic voices and capturing a specific moment, here's where it gets really interesting. Think about Burnham's Inside from 2021. Our sources call it this blend of humor, depression, performance art, perfectly encapsulating that COVID-era anxiety. And in doing so, it offered a new template for what a comedy special could even be.
It's such an excellent case study in how modern comedy can transcend traditional boundaries. Inside wasn't just a comedy special, it was this profound artistic statement that layered humor with genuine anguish. It reflected the anxieties of a specific isolating global moment perfectly. Burnham used the very medium of the internet, often a source of comedic superficiality, right, to explore deep themes: mental health, isolation, the nature of performance itself. It showed how contemporary humor can be multi-layered, deeply melancholic, and still incredibly resonant. It went far beyond simple jokes to articulate collective experiences and maybe offered a new introspective direction for the art form. #4 controversies, myths, and lesser-known truths.
Okay, let's tackle some of the big controversies and common misconceptions head-on. There's this persistent myth out there, isn't there, that comedy is dying because of cancel culture. as if all comedians are now terrified to tell a joke.
Oh yeah, it's a very prevalent sentiment, often amplified by certain media narratives. But our sources strongly suggest it's, well, mostly a myth. The truth seems to be that comedy is evolving. Today's taboos are just different from those of previous generations, not necessarily more restrictive overall. Offensive jokes aren't necessarily being erased, they're being recontextualized within a new social landscape where audience expectations, sensitivities have shifted. Comedy has always adapted to societal shifts, changing sensitivities. What was funny or acceptable in one era might be deeply offensive in another, and vice versa. This is more about an evolution of taste, social consciousness, a dynamic adaptation. It's not outright suppression or death. Comedians who complain loudly about cancel culture are often, frankly, just experiencing the natural consequences of evolving audience preferences and a broader public discourse about harm.
So it's not death, it's just metamorphosis, a constant process of adaptation, which leads right into a major controversy. Should comedians be allowed to say anything? The whole Dave Chappelle versus Netflix debate really brought this to a boil, didn't it? Sparked really passionate arguments on all sides.
It absolutely did, and it forced this fundamental debate: artistic freedom versus social responsibility. On one side, the argument is that comedians, as artists, need complete freedom of expression to challenge, provoke, illuminate without fear of reprisal. Any restriction, they argue, stifles creativity, limits truth-telling, and could lead to this bland, sanitized comedy landscape. On the other side, the argument emphasizes the real-world impact of words, particularly on marginalized communities. It questions whether artistic freedom should extend to speech that actively causes harm, promotes discrimination, or reinforces dangerous prejudice. It forces us to confront where we draw the line, and crucially, who draws it? Is it the platform, the audience, the artists themselves? It's a complex ethical tightrope, really, with no easy answers.
Yeah, it's certainly thorny. No easy answers there. Now, for a lesser-known truth about comedy, something that kind of pulls back the curtain on the craft. Many so-called improvised moments in live comedy are actually tightly rehearsed. Spontaneity is often itself a carefully constructed performance.
It's really a testament to the incredible craft and dedication involved in stand-up and sketch comedy. Making humor seem effortless, spontaneous, off the cuff, that often requires hours of meticulous planning, writing, rehearsing. Comedians will test different reactions to seemingly ad-libbed lines and practice runs, making sure that when they deliver it live, it lands with maximum impact. It gives the audience that thrill of genuine, unscripted wit. This doesn't diminish their talent at all. It highlights the depth of their artistry. Think of it like a jazz musician whose solo sounds totally improvised, but it's built on years of practice and deep understanding of music theory.
That's a great analogy. And finally, a big debate that runs through a lot of our sources. Is laughter fundamentally a coping mechanism or an escape? Are we laughing to confront the difficult realities around us, process trauma or absurdity? Or are we just laughing to forget them for a little while, to temporarily step out of our worries?
That's a really deep philosophical question, isn't it? And the answer often seems to be that it can be both. Sometimes simultaneously, or it depends heavily on the context. The intent of the comedian, the specific content of the humor, how the audience receives it, it all plays into this duality. For example, a veteran using dark humor about their experiences might be coping with trauma using laughter to create psychological distance, process the unspeakable. While someone laughing at a silly cat video online might be purely escaping the mundane, just finding a brief moment of lightness. The genius of laughter is its versatility, I think. It can provide catharsis, create distance from pain, or just offer pure, unadulterated joy, all within the same human experience. It's rarely just one or the other. #Touch High Five. Expert opinions and theories.
Okay, to deepen our understanding even more, let's bring in some diverse voices, comedians, academics, who provide these critical frameworks for understanding humor. First up, the acclaimed comedian Hannah Gadsby. She famously challenged traditional stand-up with her special Nanette, and she stated, "Self-deprecating humor is not humility, it's humiliation."
Wow.
Yeah, that's such a powerful feminist critique of traditional stand-up formats, which often rely on comedians making themselves the butt of the joke. Gadsby really challenged that long-held idea that a comedian must put themselves down for a laugh, often at the expense of their own well-being or dignity. Her argument highlights that while self-deprecation can be relatable, can build connection, it can also, particularly for marginalized individuals, reinforce personal insecurities. It can project this false sense of humility that actually undermines the comedian's strength and vulnerability. It really opened up a broader conversation about authenticity, power dynamics, the psychological toll of certain comedic styles, urging comedians to find new ways to connect without necessarily erasing themselves. It definitely changed the conversation around vulnerability and authenticity and performance, didn't it? Pushed the boundaries of what stand-up could be. Next, we have Dr. Peter McGraw, one of the minds behind that benign violation theory we talked about. He offers another profound insight, saying that humor can serve as both a social lubricant and a weapon.
That duality is incredibly insightful because it speaks directly to the immense power of humor. As a social lubricant, yeah, humor can ease tension, break the ice, foster connection. A shared laugh can instantly create rapport, solidarity, makes uncomfortable social situations smoother, builds bridges. Think of a well-placed joke diffusing an argument. However, the exact same mechanism can be deployed as a weapon. Sarcasm, mockery, put-downs. They can be used to denigrate, exclude, even oppress individuals or groups. Think about how humor is used in bullying, or how political opponents use comedic jabs to undermine credibility, legitimacy. The intention, the context, the target, that's what determines whether it unites or divides, whether it heals or harms.
It's a stark reminder of its power, which maybe we don't always appreciate. Malcolm Gladwell, the author known for his sharp analyses, offers another critical perspective. He suggests that media and comedy work best when they simplify complexity, but that, he warns, is also their danger.
Right, this is the classic double-edged sword of popular communication. Simplification can be incredibly helpful for understanding complex issues, makes them digestible, engaging for a mass audience. Comedy often excels at this distilling intricate political problems, scientific concepts, social absurdities into an accessible joke or sketch. It can be a powerful entry point to deeper understanding. However, the danger lies in oversimplification. That risks misrepresentation or trivialization of serious issues. When nuances get stripped away for the sake of a laugh, it can lead to a shallow understanding, reinforce harmful stereotypes, or even, yes, sow misinformation, especially in our fast-paced digital world.
And then we have Noam Chomsky, the renowned linguist and political activist. He has a more, maybe cynical take. He argues that satire may expose injustice, but it rarely incites real change. He seems to question how effective humor really is in challenging power structures.
Chomsky's perspective definitely prompts reflection on the limits of laughter. He suggests that while satire is brilliant at exposing hypocrisy, injustice, shining a light on absurdities and moral failings, its role might be solely diagnostic. It identifies and illustrates problems rather than being prescriptive. For Chomsky, laughter might offer catharsis, awareness, but direct action, organized movement, sustained political engagement that's typically what drives real, tangible change. So this contrasts sharply with the idea of humor as direct resistance. It suggests that while it can build awareness, it often stops short of being the catalyst for fundamental societal shifts on its own. It's kind of a sobering thought for those who believe satire alone is enough to change the world.
But then, to offer a really compelling counterpoint, sociologist Zeynep Tufekci brings us back to the power of online comedy. She states that it can reflect digital resistance, especially in repressive societies where memes are basically modern-day pamphlets circulating ideas where traditional media is shut down.
Yeah, this connects directly back to that idea of humor as dissent, particularly amplified in the digital age. Where direct protest is impossible or just too dangerous, memes and online skits become critical tools for political expression. They can spread information, mock authorities, build solidarity among dissidents in ways that are hard for authoritarian regimes to control or censor directly, precisely because they're so ephemeral, so distributed. It allows for this collective, often anonymous, voice of defiance. So this view contrasts with Chomsky's by highlighting how even seemingly light forms of humor in specific contexts, amplified by digital networks, can indeed serve as a vital precursor to action, or at least a quiet but pervasive form of it. They can sow the seeds of dissent that might eventually lead to larger movements. #6, case studies and real-life examples.
Right, it's one thing to talk theories, but another to see them play out in the real world. See the practical application of these ideas about humor. Let's ground this in some concrete examples, starting with The Onion. It's a parody news site that, bizarrely, became almost prophetic sometimes, right? Many headlines ended up eerily accurate in our kind of post-truth world, blurring satire and reality.
The Onion is such a fascinating, almost unsettling case study in how satire can become prophetic. You see headlines like, U.S. vows to defeat whoever it is we're at war with, or maybe Bush. Our long national nightmare of peace and prosperity is finally over. They satirized the political landscape so acutely that in a world increasingly filled with absurd realities, they became disturbingly prescient. In a media environment where reality often seems stranger than fiction, the Onion's exaggerated, absurd headlines started to mirror actual events. It really blurred the lines between parody and reality. What does it say about our information ecosystem when a comedic fabrication can feel more true, or at least more insightful, than official news sometimes? It suggests that satire, by pushing the boundaries of absurdity, can sometimes illuminate underlying truths about society that mainstream reporting just misses. It holds up this distorted yet weirdly revealing mirror.
Yeah, it's almost unsettling how close some of their fake headlines have landed. Another powerful example. Hasan Minhaj's Patriot Act. He brilliantly blended investigative journalism with comedy, tackling serious global issues with humor, sharp analysis. But despite all the critical acclaim, it got canceled.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, Patriot Act serves as a prime example of that friction. The friction between a comedian's desire for deep social commentary and a platform's commercial, maybe political considerations. Minhaj used his comedic lens to break down complex geopolitical topics: the Saudi government, the fashion industry's environmental impact, the student loan crisis in this accessible, engaging, often scathing way. Highly acclaimed by critics, audiences loved it, but its cancellation, despite that success and the important conversations it sparked, suggests that certain forms of deep, critical humor, especially when they touch on sensitive corporate or geopolitical topics, might still face resistance from the very platforms hosting them. It raises really important questions about corporate control over artistic freedom, the boundaries of palatable critique, and maybe what kind of uncomfortable truths major media companies are willing to broadcast.
It really makes you wonder about the power dynamics in the new media landscape. But on the flip side, the rise of YouTube and TikTok comedians, creators like Drew Gooden, Danny Gonzalez, Brittany Broski, it proves how DIY media is fundamentally shaping public discourse, offering an alternative to traditional gatekeepers.
Absolutely. These platforms have genuinely democratized comedy creation. They've shifted power from traditional studios to individual creators. New voices, often without traditional gatekeepers or formal industry training, can emerge and directly engage with cultural discourse in ways we haven't seen before. Creators can comment on viral trends, social phenomena, mainstream media, even personal experiences, delivering this commentary comedy that resonates directly with audiences who feel seen and understood. It's a really powerful shift from a centralized media landscape to one where individual creators can influence public opinion, cultural conversations directly from their bedrooms or makeshift studios, creating these micro-communities around their unique brands of humor.
And finally, a great example of evolving cultural sensitivities.
Oh.
Bollywood's conic sidekick trope. For a long time, it was just considered harmless, right? A staple of Indian cinema, providing light relief, simple laughs. But now, it's increasingly seen as reinforcing caste and class stereotypes, perpetuating outdated and harmful tropes.
This highlights the critical importance of context and critical reevaluation in humor as societies evolve. What might have been considered harmless comedic elements in one era designed to provide light relief or be a foil for the hero can become deeply problematic as societal awareness changes, as marginalized groups gain more voice and agency. The Bollywood comic sidekick, often portrayed in this simplistic, uneducated, or overtly stereotypical manner like a bumbling lower-class figure, can inadvertently perpetuate harmful notions about social hierarchies, reinforce prejudice. It's a powerful reminder that humor isn't static. It reflects, and sometimes entrenches, societal biases, and therefore it must be continually examined through a contemporary critical lens to ensure it doesn't inadvertently cause harm.
Okay, so we've covered history, psychology, modern examples, mostly within, a Western or Anglophone context. But how does laughter manifest differently around the world? What does it look like in other global comedy ecosystems? Let's take a quick trip around the globe to appreciate the sheer diversity of humor, starting with Japan. Our sources tell us Japanese comedy is often nonverbal or built around physical contrast, like those manzai duos, with their classic straight man and fool dynamic.
Yes, the cultural nuances are really fascinating. Japanese humor often leans heavily into visual and physical comedy. It relies on timing, exaggerated reactions, character archetypes, maybe more than purely verbal wit. Manzai, for instance, is a traditional stand-up style with two performers. The Tsukomi, that's the straight man, often exasperated, delivers sharp retorts, and the book The Fool, who makes silly mistakes or misinterpretations. The humor arises from the book's absurd actions or nonsensical lines, and the Tsukomi's sharp, often exasperated but ultimately kind of affectionate responses. It's a highly formalized structure that showcases a particular comedic partnership and rhythm, often seen in live theater and on TV.
That dynamic is so distinct, a precise dance between two characters. Okay, now let's move to Nigeria. Our sources highlight that Nigerian stand-up often reflects interethnic tensions, but with wit and warmth, and it's frequently delivered in multiple languages, making it incredibly accessible across such a diverse nation.
Yeah, this is a powerful example of humor's role in navigating complex social realities. Nigerian comedy often uses shared experiences of cultural differences, even interethnic tensions, as fodder for jokes. But it does so in a way that tends to foster connection and understanding across diverse groups rather than making divides worse. By addressing these sensitive topics with wit and warmth, and leveraging the country's rich linguistic diversity, often switching between English, Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, sometimes all in one set, comedians can diffuse potential conflict, build bridges. It allows people to laugh at their differences and find common ground through shared human experiences, like a really crucial element of social cohesion there.
It sounds like humor is a profound form of social glue, cultural commentary. And in France, a country known for its deep intellectual tradition, philosophical leanings. Our sources say French comedians lean heavily into philosophy and politics, often kind of rejecting broad slapstick or physical comedy.
That's a really striking contrast to the Roman emphasis on physical comedy we talked about earlier, isn't it? The French intellectual tradition absolutely influences its comedy. French humor often requires a certain degree of cultural, philosophical literacy. It relies on sophisticated wordplay, subtle irony, a critical engagement with ideas, rather than broad physical gags or simple punchlines. Comedians will dissect current political events, philosophical concepts, societal critiques with this razor-sharp wit. It reflects a preference for cerebral humor over just simple laughs. They often engage audiences in a more thoughtful, nuanced comedic experience that challenges assumptions rather than just, tickling the funny bone.
Very different from the banana peel indeed. Finally, let's look at Pakistan and India. Shared history, similar cultural nuances often inform their humor. Here, our sources indicate humor often acts as social glue and soft protest, especially under censorship or in societies dealing with heavy bureaucracy. Satirical TV shows like Hasbihal in Pakistan critique bureaucracy with a smile.
This really showcases that dual role of humor in societies facing censorship or significant bureaucratic hurdles. In these contexts, the smile and a joke can be a potent yet relatively safe form of resistance. Shows like Hasbihal can critique government inefficiencies, societal absurdities, political issues through satire, character-based comedy, allowing for public discourse and frustration to be expressed without direct confrontation. It provides a shared outlet for frustration, a sense of collective understanding, reinforces community bonds, all while operating within the confines of what's permissible. It's a powerful way to speak truth to power when direct criticism is too risky. It transforms frustration into shared laughter and this kind of quiet resilience.
Wow, okay, we've covered a vast landscape, ancient rituals, TikTok trends, Freud, global comedy. Now it's time to bring it all together and address our core question for you, our listener. Is comedy and entertainment truly overrated or underrated? Let's try and break down its strengths, weaknesses, benefits, dangers, based on everything we've unpacked.
All right, from our deep dive, the strengths of comedy seem undeniable, pretty profound. It powerfully humanizes complex issues, right? Takes abstract or difficult topics, makes them relatable, understandable, digestible through laughter. It also profoundly fosters community and coping, creates shared experiences that bring people together, builds solidarity, provides that crucial psychological release in challenging times. And as we've seen throughout history, from gestures to online memes, it can be an incredibly potent tool for political resistance. Challenging power, exposing hypocrisy, offering dissent where other forms of expression are maybe suppressed or too dangerous.
All really compelling points. But of course, it's not without its downsides, its inherent risks, weaknesses. Our sources highlight that comedy can, unfortunately, reinforce stereotypes if it's lazy or uncritical, particularly when comedians rely on outdated tropes or target vulnerable groups. We saw that with the Bollywood sidekick example. Also, the over-commercialization of comedy, especially in the streaming age, seems to sometimes have reduced artistic risk-taking, pushing creators towards safer, algorithm-friendly content that appeals maybe to the lowest common denominator. And finally, in the age of too online humor, comedy can be prone to echo chambers, where it's only really funny to your specific tribe, potentially alienating broader audiences, contributing to social fragmentation rather than unity.
Right, but balancing that out are the immense transformative benefits that I think underscore its underrated aspects. Comedy helps us question authority in a way that might otherwise be confrontational or just dangerous, allows for critical thought under the guise of entertainment. It also allows us to laugh at ourselves, which fosters a crucial sense of humility, self-awareness, the ability to find lightness in our own imperfections. Furthermore, by using irony, absurdity, inversion, comedy actively encourages critical thinking, pushes us to look beyond the surface, recognize logical fallacies, engage with deeper meanings, uncomfortable truths, often more effectively than a straightforward lecture ever could.
But with those benefits, especially in our current media landscape, come very real dangers too. That line between sharp satire and outright misinformation is getting increasingly blurry, isn't it? Especially online, where context is so easily lost and a joke can be taken as fact. And there's that insidious danger of desensitization. If everything becomes a joke, if we constantly reduce serious issues to comedic fodder, it could numb us to real pain, the urgency of actual problems, the need for genuine empathy and action.
Precisely, and that really provides a final, balanced perspective on the tightrope walk that modern comedy often performs, particularly in this digital age saturated with content. It can be a force for good, for connection, critique, an essential human coping mechanism, but it also carries the potential for harm, division, and the erosion of serious discourse. Understanding this duality, this inherent tension, is crucial, I think, to appreciating its true, multifaceted power in the world. #tag outro.
Wow, what a journey that was. From ancient rituals to algorithmic comedy, philosophical theories to global laughs, it's crystal clear that comedy and entertainment are far from just fluff. They really are, as our sources so aptly put it, the mirrors and pressure valves of any civilization. They reflect our anxieties, our joys, our conflicts, our deepest truths, often in ways nothing else really can.
And in an age of just constant information overload where we're bombarded with beta narratives, laughter isn't just relief, it's rebellion, it's connection, it's a fundamental form of meaning-making. It's a vital lens through which we process the world and engage with its complexities. And ultimately, it brings us back to that fascinating overarching question. Who gets to laugh and why?
So after this journey, where does that leave us? Is comedy truly overrated or underrated? Maybe the answer isn't so simple. Maybe it's not about its overt value, but about how deeply we've truly understood its multifaceted nature. In fact, our final thought from this deep dive is this: comedy isn't really overrated or underrated, it's misunderstood. And maybe that's precisely what makes it so incredibly powerful.
So the next time you share a meme or you find yourself laughing out loud at a stand-up routine, maybe consider not just what makes you laugh, but why it resonates with you. And what does that laughter truly reveal about the world you live in? And maybe your place within it. What hidden truths might your laughter be signaling?